Welcome back, fam. I'm Wyatt Paints, and today I've got a monster episode for you. I'm going to try to contain my rage as I paint Hulk from Trident Studios. Let's get started. Starting with the base, since I primed in gray, I saved myself some time and was able to jump straight to shading. For that, I'm using a heavy dose of Nolan oil. I wanted to try out using a makeup brush to apply this, and I'm happy to say I really like it. It laid down the shade very evenly, and it was a breeze to mop up any pools and redistribute it somewhere else. I think I'll definitely be trying this again. For the first highlight, uniform gray. Using my largest brush dampened, I gradually built up my mid-tone by dry brushing. I kept my strokes light and perpendicular to the major cracks to preserve my shadows. I gave extra focus to the edges and a space directly under where the Hulk will be standing for a bit of a spotlight effect. For the next highlight, I mixed in some bone white. This is a nice warm color to add to the gray to create a bit of a dusty look on the concrete. Anytime I saw myself leaving a visible brushstroke, I made a quick direction change and went back over it to blend it away. This is also a good shade to highlight the edges of the concrete. Now, I wanted this exposed rebar to be nice and rusty crusty, so I began with basing them with Barbarian Flesh. I did this on a mostly autopilot, as most of this will be covered in the next layers, and since the idea here is actually to build up some texture, I wasn't too worried if the first layer was a little thick and uneven. To really push the textures here, I used sterling mud on each bar in a random way. Again, I don't want to overthink this because overthinking is a fast way to accidentally make a pattern. Your best bet is to constantly change the angle that you're holding your model. This will add a lot of variation when you're actually applying the mud. Rise of Rust comes in now to highlight the crust I built up with the mud. Make sure at least a little bit of this gets on each one, but don't worry if you go a bit overboard here and there. It'll all be toned down by our final shade, so don't sweat it. Then I use this stuff. Alright, let's try this. Nihil Uck. That doesn't sound right. Either way, I used this sparingly on the bars to add a bit of variation and visual interest. The idea here is that no matter where you look, there would be these little details that tie everything together. Once that was all dry, I used a sepia shade to normalize all the weathering. This is going to filter all those effects of the previous steps to a brown, which will really sell the look. I felt the concrete could use some more dramatic shadows, so I used some Nolan oil in sort of a crack panel wash in the cracks, if you will. If you do this, be sure not to overload your brush with wash. If you do, you'll flood your model and end up staining it more than you want. A better approach is to use less, let it dry, and then go back for a second coat to deepen the shade further. This way, you get the tone you want while painting clean. Once I got the cracks nice and deep, I mixed up a highlight color using bone white and uniform gray. I thinned this down to a glaze so I can add subtle highlights to all the cracks without leaving a harsh edge of transition. Shiny silver was used to finish off the base by giving each cut edge of rebar a bit of shine. I like little details like these in the model. It's just a neat little treat for anybody that's looking closely, which most people would miss. I toned down the shine with a quick dab of sepia wash. Then I called the base done. This feels like a good place to thank my supporters over on Patreon. These are tough times, and I can't say thank you enough for all you being there for the channel. If you'd like to join and gain access to my Discord server, where you get video updates, painting help, and the chance to suggest future video topics, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Or you can hit that sub and like button. Each of those gives me one step closer to making this channel my full-time commitment. Now back to Hulk. Gunship green was my starting tone for his skin. I did a fast and dirty stipple to get it based. Too bad for me though, because this brush was too large and I needed to redo this with a smaller brush to reach those out of the way places. For the first highlight, I added livery green to my palette. Again, using a damp dry brush, I applied this evenly across the skin. This is an easy way to bring out the muscle groups on the figure without having to spend tons of time doing so. Moving on to pure livery green, this highlight had a greater focus on his face, chest, and upturned portions of his legs and back. This will help draw the eye to his upper body. For extreme highlight, I added light livery green into the mix. This time it only hit the very top of his back and his pecs, and a bit of his abs. Once that was down, I wanted to push this to almost fluorescent colors, so that's what I did. Fluorescent green was used in the lightest of dry brush, a whisper brush if you will. I needed to do his teeth next, so I mixed Menoth white with livery green and based them. This ended up feeling a bit too bright, so I gave it a watered out wash of sepia. Since I had the sepia out, I might as well add a bit of contrast to Hulk by panel lining the sepia shade into his muscles. The brown in there just seems to hit different and gives him a very dramatic look. Just remember not to overload your brush so you don't end up flooding your model with a wash and staining the crazy highlights you made earlier. I then took this time to quickly do his fingernails in Manoth white and then heavily shade them with sepia. I jumped up to his hair, mixing a fairly dark green-gray color. The fun thing here is I rather liked the look of the bright greens being semi-visible under this gray and left it as a final look. To finish the Hulk, he needed his trademark purplish shorts. A quick base of Bad Brews took care of that. I thought about doing more detail work, but I decided his skin was the focus of interest and I just left the shorts as a base coat. Then I did something I have never done, and I used a non-black color to paint the rim of his base. I figured if anyone deserved a green base, it was my boy Bruce. After final assembly, Hulk was done. I know technically this is a red Hulk figure that I just painted green, but I really just like the sculpt for Hulk, and the bonus is I can use this for a proxy for Immortal Hulk and OG Hulk. And with that, this video will come to a close. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and remember to enjoy the process.